The train slowed as it approached the small station of Aokigahara, a place I had only read about in quiet corners of the internet and in scattered travel journals. The forest nearby, often called the Sea of Trees, had a reputation that made most travelers uneasy, but I hadn't come for its darker associations. I came because I had heard that beneath its dense canopy lay a silence so deep and a beauty so raw that it felt like stepping into another world. It was early autumn when I arrived. The air carried a crispness that brushed against my face as I stepped off the train. There were only a handful of people on the platform, an elderly couple holding hands, a young photographer adjusting his camera, and a local man smoking quietly near the exit. No one spoke. Even the station announcements seemed softer here, as though the place demanded a certain respect. I had booked a small guest house run by a woman named Keiko, who had lived her entire life in the nearby village. When I reached the house, she greeted me with a warm smile that immediately eased the tension I didn't realize I had been carrying. The house itself was simple but comforting, tatami mats, sliding doors, and a faint smell of green tea lingering in the air. "You've come for the forest," she said gently as she poured me tea. I nodded. "I've heard it's different." Keiko paused for a moment before replying. "It is not what people think. The forest is quiet, yes, but it is also alive. You must walk with respect, and it will show you its beauty." The next morning, I set out early. The entrance to Aokigahara was marked by a wooden sign and a narrow path that disappeared into a sea of towering trees. As soon as I stepped inside, the world changed. The sounds of the outside, cars, distant chatter, even the wind, seemed to vanish. In their place was a stillness so complete it felt almost physical. The ground beneath my feet was uneven, formed by ancient lava flows from Mount Fuji's eruption centuries ago. Twisted roots stretched across the path like frozen waves, and moss covered nearly every surface, giving the forest an almost otherworldly green glow. The trees grew densely, their branches intertwining overhead, blocking out much of the sunlight. At first, the silence made me uncomfortable. I found myself walking faster, as though trying to escape it. But after a while, something shifted. My footsteps became softer, my breathing steadier. I began to notice details I would have otherwise missed: the delicate patterns of the leaves, the way light filtered through small gaps in the canopy, the faint sound of my own heartbeat. There were markers along the trail, ribbons tied to branches, and occasional signs reminding visitors to stay on the path. I followed them carefully, aware that it was easy to get lost here. The forest had a way of disorienting you. Compasses often malfunctioned due to the magnetic properties of the volcanic soil, and the uniformity of the trees made it difficult to distinguish one area from another. After about an hour, I reached a clearing where a small cave opened into the earth. This was one of the lava caves the region was known for. I stepped inside, guided by a flashlight. The temperature dropped immediately, and the air became damp and cool. The walls were lined with ice formations that had formed over years, even during warmer months. Standing there, deep within the earth, I felt a strange sense of connection, not just to the place, but to time itself. This cave had existed long before I was born, long before modern cities and noise. It was a reminder of how small and temporary we are in the grand scheme of things. When I emerged back into the forest, the light felt brighter than before. I sat down on a fallen log and took out a small notebook I had brought with me. I began to write, not about anything specific, just whatever came to mind. Thoughts flowed more freely here, as though the forest had stripped away the distractions that usually cluttered my mind. As the day went on, I encountered a few other visitors. Most of them walked quietly, their expressions thoughtful. There was a shared understanding among us, an unspoken agreement to respect the space we were in. No one played music or spoke loudly. Even cameras were used sparingly. At one point, I met an older man who introduced himself as Hiroshi. He had been visiting the forest for over 20 years. "People misunderstand this place," he said, as we walked together for a short while. "They think it is only about sadness, but it is also about reflection. Many people come here to think, to find clarity." "Do you come here for that?" I asked. He smiled. "At first, yes. Now I come because it feels like home." We parted ways after a while, and I continued deeper into the forest. The path became narrower, less defined. I made sure to keep track of my surroundings, occasionally glancing back to ensure I could retrace my steps. There was a moment, standing alone among the trees, when I felt something I had never experienced before. It wasn't fear, nor was it excitement. It was a profound sense of stillness, as though the world had paused for just a second. In that moment, all my worries about work, about the future, about things beyond my control, seemed distant and unimportant. I stayed there for what felt like hours, simply observing. A leaf falling to the ground, the subtle movement of branches, the way shadows shifted as the sun moved overhead. It was a kind of meditation, but without effort. Eventually, I made my way back towards the entrance. The transition back to the outside world was gradual. The sounds returned first, the distant hum of cars, the chatter of people. Then came the light, brighter and harsher than the soft glow within the forest. When I returned to the guest house, Keiko was waiting. "How was it?" she asked. I searched for the right words, but found none. "It was quiet," I said finally. She nodded, as though she understood exactly what I meant. That evening, I sat outside, looking towards the dark silhouette of the forest in the distance. I realized that what I had experienced wasn't just about a place. It was about a state of mind, a reminder that in a world filled with constant noise and movement, there are still places where silence exists, where you can hear your own thoughts clearly. Over the next few days, I returned to the forest multiple times. Each visit felt different. Sometimes it was peaceful, other times slightly unsettling, but it was always real, always honest. The forest didn't try to be anything other than what it was. On my last day, I woke up before sunrise and made one final trip. The early morning light gave the forest a completely different atmosphere. Mist hung low among the trees, and everything felt softer, almost dreamlike. I walked slowly, taking in every detail, knowing it would be my last time here for a while. When I reached the clearing with the fallen log, I sat down again and opened my notebook. This time, I didn't write much. There was no need. As I prepared to leave, I took one last look around. The forest stood silent, unchanged, as it had for centuries, and yet I felt changed. Back at the station, as the train began to move, I watched the trees fade into the distance. I knew that Aokigahara would remain a place many people misunderstood, a place often defined by its darker reputation. But for me, it would always be something else, a place of stillness, of reflection, of quiet truth. And in a world that rarely pauses, that kind of place is more valuable than most people realize.